Welcome to the Functioning Griefster, a podcast about grief, love, and the legacy those we've lost still leave behind. I'm Alexandra Spencer, a sports and holistic therapist and a grieving mom to my son Declan, my best friend, my sunshine, my soulmate. Each week I sit down in the back of Dec's van with someone from the club no one ever wants to join. We cry, we laugh, we swear, and we honour their stories, uncovering the powerful bonds that even death just cannot break. There's no script, no rules, just honesty, heart, and a lot of courage. This podcast is part of my one-woman mission to challenge the taboo around grief, especially when someone dies too soon. I don't believe their name should be buried with them. Their voices still echo through us. So if you've ever felt like you were thrown into a cold, dark ocean with no rescue ring in sight, this is the place for you. So grab your life jacket, you're not alone. Hi, so welcome to the Functioning Griefster Podcast. My name's Alex, and today I have Sharon Luca with me to talk all about her son called Luca. So if you can, well, tell me a little bit about you first, Sharon.
Sure. So I, Sharon Luca, because I added Luca's name to our surname after he passed away. My promise to him was to keep his name and memory alive. I was never sure how I was really going to actually do that, but it was just something that I knew I wanted to do. And the first thing I did was sort of tattoo his name on my wrist.
Yeah.
Eventually got his name added to our surname, so it's Luca-Chatter, but most people know me as Sharon Luca, which is great because it's obviously my son's name.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm 49 nearly. I have a younger son after having Luca. After Luca passed away, I used to be a project manager. I'm now chronically ill, so my life has changed dramatically in the last 13 years since the loss of Luca. And but the one thing is I won't give up. I'll just keep going and try my best.
So can you tell me about Luca?
Yeah, so he was my first child. I had a great pregnancy with him. It was fantastic. I hardly had any
So were you
morning
trying
sickness.
for a baby?
We were.
Was he planned?
Yeah, he's completely planned.
Yeah.
We'd saved up to have him, and we fell pregnant after 4 months of trying. So it was really, really lovely, and it felt like a textbook pregnancy because I hadn't barely any morning sickness at all, and I felt great during the pregnancy. The only thing that the midwife was concerned about was that I was measuring small with him, but I had quite a small athletic frame.
You are tiny. You are tiny.
And much bigger now than I was. But so she said I'd like a growth scan done just to double check on things, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And this was in the April, so this is April 2012. So they're coming up to 13 years now, and she says, the first date that's coming up is Friday the 13th, and she said to me, are you superstitious? And I said, normally I am, but I'd rather make sure my baby's okay.
Yeah.
And so we went with it, and we had the growth scan. The sonographer knew the person who lived at our house before we did, and she kept talking about him and everything, and gave us lots of scan pictures. Little did we know that she had missed something on the growth scan.
Right.
So we came away from that thinking everything was fine, told everything was fine.
Do you think she was distracted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I said to her, is everything okay? Are the charts okay? Yeah, everything looks great. And it wasn't obviously then till Luca passed away, it was the first day of my maternity leave, and he passed away in my womb, so he was due to be born 2 weeks later.
Okay. So how many weeks were you at that point?
36. Yeah, and we think he would have been born 2 weeks early because I had an issue with my pelvis.
Yeah.
So I was with a obstetrician who was going to literally check me that week for whether we need to be delivering early, and then he passed away, and I didn't know until the evening, because we're such a football family. We were watching the Euros at the time, and I think it was Spain was playing that night, and other than England, I support Spain, and I had done the previous World Cup and Euros as well, and so we were watching the game, and he was always active when the football was on. It's like he knew football, he was going to be a footballer, so we used to joke about him being a footballer, but he wasn't kicking at all, and he'd kick during the day. Right. And then my husband said, "Oh, baby's really quiet this evening." I was like, "Yeah, it's really strange because it's his most active time." And he goes, "Oh, let me get you a cold drink." So he got me, normally it was a cold glass of Coke. I don't normally drink Coke, but it was what you'd get him moving. So he got me a bit of that, and there was nothing. So he goes, "Oh, let me get you a bit of chocolate." So he got me a bit of chocolate. I said, "Let me just go and lay on my left side upstairs." So that normally gets him moving as well. Again, nothing. So we got a little bit worried, thinking, why, is he like ran out of room? Or?
You know your own body, don't you? You know how your baby normally behaves.
Yeah, you know their routine and their pattern of when they're going to move and stuff. And so we called the hospital, and they said, "Oh, come in, we'll do a scan." Mm-hmm. And this was obviously evening. By the time we got to the hospital, it was probably about 11 in the evening, and we got scanned by a midwife, and she says, "Oh, I'm always having problems with this machine." She goes, "Let me get my senior, who's normally better with the machine." And then she came, and I saw them glance at each other, and I knew something was wrong. And she says, "I just need to get the doctor." And I knew. Yeah. I knew something was wrong. I wasn't expecting him to have passed away, but I knew something was wrong. And then when he said, "I'm sorry," that was it. This big scream came out of me.
It's that word, isn't it? I'm sorry.
Yeah. And my husband just fell to his knees, cradling me as I screamed and cried, and it was the most horrific moment of our lives. Nothing has ever haunted me as much as that week.
And the cruelty is that you then have to give birth to them.
Yeah. And then because it was night, it was midnight almost by the time it had been confirmed, he says, "Normally we would get somebody else to scan you, but they're not here now because it's so late. You'd have to come back in the morning." And so I had to go back the next day. We barely slept, obviously, because we just, when we did sleep and we woke up, it was like, we kind of looked at each other and we knew both of us was thinking the same thing. Have we just had a nightmare?
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and he had tears in his eyes, and I thought, no, it's not been a nightmare. And I was putting my shoes on and stuff, and I just broke down crying before we had to get to the hospital. And we just cried and cried. I said, "I can't believe this is happening." Yeah. And then we got this call from the hospital to say, "Actually, can you come at 8 instead of 9? I'm like, "Okay." And so obviously we were up early. My husband had to phone his manager to say, "I'm not coming into work because this is what's happened." And then I said to him, I'm really close with my youngest brother, Stephen. So I said to him, and he lived in London at the time, I said, "Can you let Stephen know so he can make his way home?" And I says, oh, my mum knows we're going to the hospital today because we were supposed to see the obstetrician. I says, tell her as well because she'll be texting me later. So he made those 3 phone calls that morning before we went to the hospital. And my mum and dad were self-employed at the time, so my mum closed the post office that she had at the time, and then they broke the news to my sister and my other brother, etc. and stuff. And we got to the hospital, and we were made to wait for ages because the receptionist was so incompetent. And I was thinking, oh, please let this be wrong. Let him be alive. Because let this scan be actually. Even though I hadn't felt him move, and they confirmed, yes, sorry, he has passed away. And then we had to see the obstetrician anyway and say, right, what are the next steps? And he said, you can have a C-section, but I wouldn't advise it because it's going to take you longer to recover. Or we can give you the tablets now to induce labour. And then you would come back tomorrow and we give you more tablets. And they give you more tablets because they want you to deliver as quick as possible. It's stillborn. So they gave me the double amount of tablets. And then, so we then came back home and had to tell more family. Obviously, my husband's family needed to know. And my parents came with my sister. Stephen started making his way back from London. And it was just such a daze of having to tell people. And then we're back in the hospital again on Wednesday. So that was the Tuesday. By then, Wednesday we went in. My waters broke around 6 o'clock, just after tea time. And the labour was awful, absolutely awful.
I think it's when you know that you're giving birth to a sleeping baby. The pain through labour is horrendous anyway, but when you know that your baby's not going to cry, your baby's not going to open its eyes, I know for me, I kind of almost felt that I deserved the pain in some crazy way, to the point I didn't want any pain relief. And you're having that emotional and physical pain, and you know you're not going to get the reward of this beautiful baby that you're going to see grow at the end of it. You'll still have your beautiful baby, but it's a whole other scenario, isn't it?
It is. And I was immediately in a lot of pain though, as soon as my waters broke, and they tried to give me gas and air and it wasn't helping, and so they said, right, we need to do an epidural. And they knew I was giving birth to a sleeping baby, but for some reason they gave me a junior anaesthetist. And he couldn't get the epidural in. He tried 6 times. And I was screaming at this point.
Because you're going through hell anyway.
Yeah. And then my husband was shouting at them and saying, are you really seriously doing this?
Yeah.
And then they called the senior and she did it within a minute.
Yeah.
And then, there was a calm because the pain had gone at that point. And that's hence why I had this pelvis issue. That's why there was some more pain. And it was just like, I couldn't believe that they would give me a junior anaesthetist when already we're going through so much, which was another, I always feel like there was trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, and the NHS just weren't looking after us at all well.
I remember being while we were waiting for the contractions to kind of build, I was in a room next to someone giving birth full term, and I could hear them scream, then the baby cry. Yeah, and it was just like, that shouldn't happen. Yeah. That should not happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had to go through that as well.
No, and I'm sorry for you having to go through that as well. And the problem is, so many women are going through it even to this day.
And then are just left.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing. So tell me about when you first saw Luca.
So when I gave birth the following morning, and the midwife that we'd had through the night, she stayed until I'd given birth to him. And so she went on a sort of overtime. And but as soon as they would tell me to push, obviously, because I'd had the epidural. And then as soon as I'd given birth to him, and it was so silent, and they said, oh, he's gorgeous, and I got a glimpse of him, and they said, we'll clean him up and give him to you very shortly. And I said, okay. For some reason they took him to a different room, and to this day I still don't know why they did that. And they had a problem with detaching my placenta at the time as well, and so I had to go then to surgery to have the placenta removed. And then I thought, is that the reason why he's passed away?
Right.
So I asked the surgeon, is that the reason?
Yeah.
They said no, it's quite a common thing for it to happen like that. And they said, but we have checked your placenta and there's no blockages, so there's, that's not the reason why he's passed away either. And so, and to this point I hadn't seen Luca again. So I had said, as I was going up to surgery, to my husband, get Luca and have time with him. Yeah. I came back down, and my husband's eyes were redder than they were before, and I was like, where's Luca? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, what? And he says, they haven't brought him back. And he says, I went to ask for him, and they said, are you the father of the dead baby?
No.
Yeah. And broke me as soon as he said it. And obviously he'd sat there crying since that time. They'd said it to him, and I'd come back from surgery. And I was just like, so what do they mean they don't know? And he goes, they don't know where he is. And I said, surely he can't be. Then this other midwife came in, and I said, where's our son? And she said, I don't know, I'll try and find out. She never came back. And a few times that happened, I was like, but the last midwife said she'd find out, and she didn't come back. Can you please tell us where our son is? And the next midwife we asked, she came back, she says, I don't know. And for 9 hours we were asking. 9 hours we were like, where's our son? They've misplaced his body. And
things like that just shouldn't happen.
No, exactly. And it wasn't until our bereavement midwife came on duty, and she came to see us. This was sort of nearly 5 o'clock in the evening by this point, and I'd given birth to him in the morning. And she'd come in and she goes, oh, let me see him. I says, he's not here. We don't know where he is. And she says, what? And I told her they took him to clean him and bring him back, and they never brought him back. And she just stormed. She goes, right, leave it with me. She stormed out the room, and she found him. She found him. He was in the next room all along.
You're not joking.
All that time he'd been in the next room, and nobody had decided to even look there or follow the midwife who had delivered him.
All that undue trauma you and your husband went through.
Yeah.
No, that's just not good enough, is it?
No. So we finally got him 9 hours later, and then we were told, right, you can go up to the bereavement room with him, and then you can call your family to come and have see him and everything. So our parents were coming and our siblings were coming, is what we'd agreed, and then. But I didn't want to let him go by that point, because I said no, because you'd already lost him for 9 hours. And this is where we have to take him to put him in the Moses basket and then bring him. I said, can you promise me you will not leave him now? You will bring him immediately to me?
Yeah, you're going to be so frightened at that point.
Yeah. And then Sam, my bereavement midwife, says, I'll make sure.
Yeah.
So that was my reassurance.
Yeah.
So I got wheelchaired up to the bereavement room, and they got me into the bed I had a catheter on, etc. and stuff, so they had to get me comfortable. And then they brought Luca in, and thankfully they didn't take ages. He was in a Moses basket and everything, as they said. And by that point, Jazz's parents were already there, my husband's parents and his siblings, because they live nearby. And so then he came in and they saw him, and immediately my mother-in-law said, "Oh, he looks like your little brother." Yeah, he does. And he resembled my family. He and you could see features of the family in him and everything, and it was just lots of tears. It was. I think at that point I'd cried so much that I didn't have any more tears left. I just wanted
your body
to
goes
see him.
into shock as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just wanted everyone to see him, and I was still being that proud mum to say, "Look at my son," kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It's like right over there.
Oh, is
It'll
it?
go off. Yeah, hopefully he'll. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay. No, that's
I was
fine.
meant to turn my phone off. Oh, what an idiot.
That's all right.
Oh, I'm so sorry about
That's
that.
okay. So, yeah, and even my grandmother came as well with my parents because she wanted to see him. So they did bring her, and she said, "You know what, he's too beautiful for this world." And that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
That she'd said that. And so they'd stayed until sort of 8 o'clock until they had to leave. My dad wanted to hold him, and I reluctantly said no, because when we had initially held him, some blood came out of his nose, and we weren't expecting that, and we thought, oh, he's really fragile.
Yeah.
So I explained that to my dad, and he was disappointed, obviously, that he couldn't hold his grandson. And, I still regret that now, because I think actually I should have just done it. I should have just said, just be careful.
But you did what you felt was right at the time. And I know you're a Christian. Did Luca, was there anyone around that could bless him?
Yeah, we had him blessed by a chaplain.
Yeah.
And my husband's not Christian, but, he was happy for that to happen. And he... So we did do that, and then we had him over that night period, but obviously we were sleeping, and the next morning they're like, right, we're taking him. We were like, what? We've just slept, and now you're saying we're taking him? We've not even had time with him. And during the night, as a motherly instinct kicks in, I kept checking on him. And then, I think to myself, what am I checking on? He can't even move. He's not alive. And but it was motherly instinct. I just kept checking on him, waking up through the night. And then when they said, we're going to have to take him in an hour, we were like, no.
Yeah.
We were, we sort of scooped him out of the Moses basket and took him turns holding him. And even then, I was rocking him in my arms. Why am I rocking? It's just all those motherly instincts kick in.
And that's what I think no one tells you when you have a sleeping baby, is your hormones, your brain, your body does not know that baby's not breathing. So you're producing milk.
Yeah.
Every inch of you has that protection to that baby, the nourishing them, wanting to feed them.
Yeah.
And no one kind of warns you about that.
No, that's it, exactly. No one warns you about all these feelings that are going to be there naturally. And then every time the midwife came back to say, right, I need to take him now, otherwise he's going to deteriorate, I kept sending her back. I think I must have sent her back up to 10 times, probably 6 times. And then it was my husband that said, Shaz, we need to let him go now. And it was the hardest thing to do. Absolutely broke me so much. And I remember her saying, I'll take him in his Moses basket. and she said, shall I put him in the Moses basket? I said, no, I will. So I kissed his head and his nose, and I said, you'll never be forgotten. I promise you, your name will always live on. And I kissed him, I put him in the Moses basket, and she took him. And I screamed, and I was like, no, I want him back.
Yeah.
I want him back. And she'd have gone out the door, and that was it. Never to see him again. I wasn't ready to let him go.
No.
I wasn't ready at all. And it broke me so much.
And that stays with you, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I could talk about him so much, but when I talk about that moment,
Yeah.
I can't hold the emotions back.
And that's because you clearly started to love him the minute you knew he existed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he died on the 18th and I gave birth to him on the 21st. So that week, every year, is such a hard week.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get easier, you just learn to live with it better. And then we had to sign the post-mortem papers and then leave the hospital without him.
And that's, again, horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you see other people leaving with the car seats and you're leaving the maternity without your baby.
Yeah. And I looked back at the hospital because my youngest brother Stephen, he stayed at our house and then picked us up, and because the parking was horrendous anyway. And then I looked back at the hospital as we were driving out, and I thought, my baby's there in a mortuary now.
Yeah.
And I've got to go home without him. And I walked into the house and I just burst out crying. This is not how this was meant to be.
No.
And that afternoon, after we got home, the delivery of his cot and pram and car seat all came as well. And I forgot it was supposed to be coming that day. And when they showed up, and I knocked, and my brother said, "Oh, it's a delivery driver," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's his crib and his car seat and everything." And then he was, the delivery driver was like, "Oh, you're getting ready for this bundle of joy come in," and I could hear him, and I was just sat on the sofa crying because that's not what it was all. It's all gone wrong.
Yeah.
And we then had to wait for the post-mortem results. We had to wait for his body to be released from the coroners, and then we could plan his funeral. So his funeral happened nearly a month later, actually, because it was quite a long process. And by this point, obviously, extended family, cousins, uncles, aunts, everybody knew. And so they were coming over to pay their condolences and asking what had happened, and I says, we don't know why he's died yet, we still don't know. And going through that whole process of planning his funeral and picking a casket for him is just the most hardest thing to do, because they give you a baby funeral fund that you can go by, and it's the basic of basics. It's like a wooden box casket, and I was like, no, he's got to go better than that. So my husband said, you know what, let's just pay for what we need to. So we bought him a beautiful casket that had a rainbow and flowers and everything on it, and beautiful meadow and things like that, kind of similar to kind of how I envision heaven to be.
Yeah.
And had his name put on it. And then sort of the funeral came and went, and we still sort of sitting there thinking, why did he die? And I was blaming myself at this point. I must have done something wrong. And I think, that bread I ate was 2 days out of date, but it was in the fridge, but it had nothing on it, and maybe that was it, or did I bend down too low or something? Did I do something? Did I hold something heavy? All these things kept going through my head. And, it wasn't heavy to me, but maybe it was too heavy for a pregnant woman. And all these different things kept going through my head. It must be my fault. And then we got the post-mortem results 2 months later, so 2 months after he'd passed. And the obstetrician was going through his charts with us, and she circled the growth scan. And she said, why was this not picked up? And I said, what? We looked at each other, like, what is that? What are you showing us? And she says, the growth scan in April. And I just looked at her and I said, but she told us everything was fine and that we could go. And she goes, no, it showed that he had a small abdominal. Right. And you should have been monitored. And I said, nobody said that to us. No one, not even weeks after any midwife appointments or anything after that. No, but nobody said anything. And that was the reason he died.
So if that had been picked up and you had been monitored, could he have had a safe delivery?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we know for sure he would have had a safe delivery, because the exact same thing happened a year later with our younger son.
Wow.
So it really confirmed that if that had been picked up and had been monitored, and their scans were almost identical. I've got pictures of them even on my phone today, just to remind myself sometimes of how close it was, So it was medical negligence in the end, and we did go to a solicitor about it. And whilst the independent midwife said, yes, there was negligence, the independent obstetrician said, not necessarily. And it doesn't mean that he still would have lived. And I thought, absolute rubbish, because we've had the exact same problem happen with our younger son, and he's here,
and it's actually
healthy and absolutely fine. Yeah. And because it didn't go to a third independent, the case got thrown out.
And I think it's very hard when you're grieving to find the strength to do that in the first place, and then to have that knockback. It just heightens it even more. And because for you that baby's your world, and you want to fight for justice for them, and you want to change protocols for other people, because to you they matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And to any parent who's had that positive pregnancy test and are already planning their future with that baby, regardless of what stage you lose a baby, it's traumatic.
Because I think you grieve for that baby right there and then, but you also grieve for that child that won't have their first day at school, that won't go to college, that won't ring you up needing a lift at 3 a.m, that won't walk down the aisle, that won't give you grandchildren. You grieve for all the things that you're not going to have. And I don't think anyone talks about that, or anyone tells you that you're going to, on what would have been their 18th birthday, think about what you would have done. Because for me, I feel that in the UK, grief, excuse the pun, is buried. And it's not spoken about, and it's a taboo subject, which ends up creating, well, it's very detrimental for that person that's grieving. And I know you have experience of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. After our son was born, a year later, he was born exactly a week before Luca's first birthday. So he's on the 14th and Luca was on the 21st of June. And I had to fight for him to be born early, because knowing the negligence that had happened with Luca, I was prodding my belly at night just to make sure he was alive.
Because of the trauma.
Like yeah, exactly. And knowing that at any point he could pass away.
Yeah.
And so I was a complete mental mess when I was carrying Kai, especially towards the end, even though I was being monitored very carefully. I just knew anything could still happen. So I wrote a letter to the head of obstetricians at the hospital and said, I want him born early by cesarean section. And I says, I will only follow your guidance if you can 100% guarantee me he's going to be born alive. And because they couldn't guarantee that, they had to go with what I said. And he was then born at just before 37 weeks. I said, we'll sign whatever papers we need to do to take, to say that we're taking the risk. But being a Christian, I had written all my prayer down at Coventry Cathedral, which is my place of worship. And I'd said to God right from the beginning, from conceiving him, I'd said, he's got to come before Luca's birthday, and he's got to be well. And everything I'd written in my prayer came true. I said he needs to be born at least a week before Luca's birthday as well, if not before. And literally everything. I said I don't want him to go into NICU or anything like that, even though he'd be born early and stuff. So my prayers were answered completely to the letter. And so he was born early. He didn't need to go into care. He was healthy. Everything was perfectly fine. And it was another confirmation, really, that they'd done
what
the
could
same
have been.
with Luca.
So bittersweet, really.
Yeah, really bittersweet. And but he gave me life again. He gave colour back to my world, which had been so dark. And people were saying, oh, you've got Luca back and this, that and the other. And I was like, no. Luca is Luca,
exactly.
And Kai is Kai. He's not replaced Luca in any way. I don't feel like my grief has stopped now because I've got another son. And what people say can be, sometimes I think, would you even think about what you've just said?
It can be hurtful, but I think in the UK, I think we like to fix things, and thinking that our empty words can fix someone's heart it's not going to happen.
No. And I teach about that now, obviously as a grief management specialist, but that's 13 years on, and a lifetime of, it feels like a lifetime of experience, but also training that I have, got qualifications to now talk about that. But then what really stood out for me was the fact that all these many traumas that happened at the time of Luca passing away, which eventually became chronic illness for me.
Yes.
So it's what I've learned over time is that trauma stay in your body unless it's worked out. Through talk therapy and
we're not very good at doing that here.
No, exactly. And the number of traumas that happened at that time really took a toll on my health, and I was then diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which was 4.5 years later. But I couldn't, say to the NHS, look what you've done to me. I've lost my successful career as a project manager because of the illness. My younger son was then 3.5. He was wondering, why can't Mummy just scoop me up and hug me like she used to, because I was in so much pain. And it was it changed our lives again.
Yeah.
It was like finding your new normal again. And I always say to people, when you go through anything traumatic, whether it is, loss or loss of health or loss of financial circumstances, which was all of that for us, as if you're finding your new normal every time. And that's what I was doing again. But it took me 3 years to learn to manage my illness and my new limitations and disabilities that I now had, and all because of the significant traumas that had happened when Luca had passed away, and it was all linked.
But I know on the back of that, and obviously it doesn't make any of that okay, and I know you would rather Luca be here than anything, but you kept that promise to him, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Not only in your surname, but you've done something pretty incredible as well.
Yeah, I set up the Luca Foundation because I think it was probably a couple of years after I found out about these things called cuddle cot. And what they are is they act as a cooling system so that you can keep your baby with you longer to say goodbyes.
For someone that doesn't understand why a cooling system, can you explain why that means a family can have their baby for longer?
Yeah, so it acts like a cooling mat, basically. It has a motor that pumps cold water into it, and it keeps the baby's body cold so they don't deteriorate.
Yeah.
And so it's because they're so small, they deteriorate so quick.
Yeah.
Which is why we couldn't have much time with him at all. And if we'd had the cuddle cot, one, he wouldn't have been misplaced for 9 hours because he would have gone straight into the cuddle cot.
Yeah.
And then, secondly, we would have had him for up to a week rather than those few hours in the next morning where we had to give.
And helps you to somewhat process what's happening.
Exactly.
Rather than, here's your baby, or we've lost your baby, we found your baby, and now we're taking your baby.
Yes.
And you've got to digest all of that.
All of that trauma.
Yeah.
And this gives parents the ability to start their grieving process while still having their baby with them.
Yeah.
Which is so fundamentally important for their mental health. And if we'd have had that, there's a chance now that I wouldn't have fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't lost his body for 9 hours, there's a chance that I wouldn't have had that trauma that contributed to fibromyalgia. So there are many factors that would have changed at that point for us if we'd have had a cuddle cot. So therefore, I set up the Luca Foundation to make sure every grieving family has a cuddle cot in baby loss. But I also want to grow the charity to make sure parents that have lost a child at any age up to the age of 18 will have a cuddle blanket, which is the bigger version of a cot.
So it's the same principle.
It's the same principle, but it lays on a bed as opposed to in a crib. Yeah. And but they cost £5,000 each.
And how much is a cuddle cot?
A cuddle cot is £2,000. A repair that what we do is keep maintaining them can cost anything between £100 and £750.
So it's expensive but priceless.
Yes.
At the same time, does every maternity unit in the UK have one of these cuddle cots?
Yes, they have multiple ones now, and more are getting to know the Luca Foundation, so we get more requests to repair them. So some have still got them sitting in cupboards because they're not working.
Right.
But as the Luca Foundation will fund those repairs and get them working, so they're available for families when they need them. So now we are making our way around the country and getting all these repaired, but there's over 4,000 in the country.
And how many blankets are there currently?
Very little. Very little blankets. Hospices sometimes have blankets, not all, because they will generally have older children there. But paediatric wards, A&E departments, they don't.
No.
And that's something we want to address.
And how do you raise the money? Is it government funded, lottery funded? How do you do this?
No government funding. We do apply for grants from the lottery, etc. as well. So far we haven't had any, but the few little grants we have had through local county council, etc., have been used to write a book that I've done for children to understand grief.
Oh wow!
So
that's amazing.
So yeah, it was inspired by my younger son when he asked how his older brother had died.
Yeah.
So he's grown up knowing he's got an older brother because we always keep Luke's picture in every room of the house. And so as a toddler, he used to look at the picture and they say, "That's me," and I says, "No, that's your brother, Luca."
Yeah. And
then he said, "Where's my brother? Where's my brother?" You know, and I'll say, "He's in the sky." But when he started school, primary school, so through nursery it was fine. They knew he'd talk about his brother. When he was starting primary school, I warned him that he will talk about his brother. And when they have that usual conversation when you start school, who's at home, pets, brothers, sisters.
Which is a tricky conversation. I don't have any other children, but my 3-year-old niece can't understand where Deck's gone.
Oh.
So it's a very hard conversation for children to understand.
Yeah. And I'll send you a copy of this book.
Yes, please, thank you.
So when he started school and he said, I have a big brother, he's a star in the sky. And obviously the other children laughed because they don't understand that concept, but the teachers didn't handle it at all well.
Yeah.
And he came home upset. The first time ever in over 4 years that he'd spoken about his brother, he'd come home upset, and I asked him, and he told me what happened, and it must have played on his mind for all those months because
they're sponges at that age, aren't they? Little sponges,
and not realising. But then the Christmas holidays, which was obviously 3 months later, he asked me, "How did Luca die?" I knew one day he was going to ask me, but it's such a hard conversation to have nonetheless. And that conversation then ended up going into a book because I realised how their little minds work and the kind of things that they ask. So I put that into a book. It's been beautifully illustrated. It was funded by our local county council to get that done. It's called Why Did Grandad Die?
Yeah.
But it's we did Grandad because obviously the natural order for a child to lose somebody is going to be great granddad, granddad, etc. And then so we named it that for that reason. But it explains the whole reason why we have a funeral to say goodbye to the body, but actually it's the soul that leaves the body that becomes a star,
and so needed.
So we now donate that to primary schools, and I do the training for teachers to have that conversation with children in school.
So in Luca's legacy, you've written a book which is helping children that have lost a sibling, a parent, a grandparent. You are funding the cold cots and trying to fund more blankets as well. To enable families to spend more time with their children when they pass away. You're doing all of this whilst grieving, all in your son's name because you made a promise to him that he wouldn't be forgotten.
And it's you can never plan how you're going to keep their memory alive.
No.
As you all know. And it all sort of happened when I had a breakdown on his 6th anniversary, because by that point I was chronically ill. I'd lost my career, my financial freedom. Kai was now at school. It was the first anniversary I was by myself. And I had a breakdown. And all of that sort of suppressed emotions came up. And I realised in that breakdown that it was because I didn't have enough time with him. And that was the realisation that actually I need to do this charity so parents do get that time with their baby. Because I'm suffering, not only physically, mentally and emotionally, but I'll suffer for the rest of my life for not having had that time with him. And I don't want any other parents to go through that. I did write another book called Angel Warrior, Life After Loss, about what it's like to lose a child and the various emotions you're going through, what people should do if you're supporting somebody who's lost a child, and the things that you shouldn't do when you've lost a child as well. So
can you just give me one each of those? What you should do, just a quick one, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. For people out there that might listen to this and are supporting someone.
Yeah, so I always say, never say it was meant to be, because it's not the natural order of life. It's not meant to be this way at all, regardless of what God's plan was for you. It still doesn't feel right, and I'm a Christian, and I will always say to God, it still wasn't right that you did this to me.
Yeah.
And one day I'll realise why you've done it, because I'll come up to heaven and you'll tell me.
Yeah.
But also, if you are supporting somebody who's going through it, let them cry.
Yeah.
Let them get those emotions out. Don't feel uncomfortable. Don't make them feel uncomfortable at all by expressing their emotions. And that goes with all types of loss as well, to be honest. I always wanted to cuddle Luca even more, obviously, not having had enough time with him, so I designed a teddy bear for our charity called the Endless Love Bear, and it's got a pocket at the back that opens. It's got a sustainable pouch in there, so you can put their ashes in there or anything that you can then hug the teddy bear, so you're hugging your child or loved one. It could be a parent even, you can have it for. With my bear, obviously, because we'd already scattered his ashes by that point, with my bear, I've got his hospital bands in there.
Yeah.
And I'll cuddle him, his hospital bands, and you know, that's what he wore, that was what was on him.
Yeah.
And so we've now opened a bereavement shop online, which supports families. So if you're supporting somebody who's grieving, rather than give them flowers that wilt away and things very quickly, you could give them a wellbeing hamper, which will hold things like the teddy bear in there, so they've got that to hold on forever. It's all different packages, sizes, but the top one sort of has like bath salts and pillow mist and all those different wellbeing
because
things.
your sleep is massively affected.
Yeah.
There might be times that all you want to do is sleep.
Yes.
And then there's times you can't.
Yeah.
And I'm quite shocked that I'm 16 months into my grief journey, and I'll be honest, I never knew that existed.
It's quite new, to be honest. And we launched it last year, and so the profits from the bereavement shop go to the Luca Foundation to continue our work there.
Because I want to point out as well that this is non-profit. You do not take a wage from any of this, do you?
No.
You do this because of the promise you made to your son.
Yeah.
So, Sharon's not doing this now as a job or a paid job. You're doing this out of love.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that people know that, because you are not making any financial gains on the loss of Luca.
No.
You're just keeping a promise.
Yes.
Which is what I'm trying to do with Declan as well. And it's not about making money.
No, that's right.
It's about keeping a promise and...
Our promise to our sons.
Yeah.
And I think what people sometimes, without even knowing or asking, they just assume a charity, you're going to be one of these other charities that take a big, massive salary out of it. And, there's not enough. The amount of times I've got asked how much of the pound that they donate goes to the cause, I'm like 100%.
Yeah.
Well, how do you run the charity then? I says, we run the charity
Through love.
and
hard work.
And any admin and all of that comes through the gift aid. So people underestimate how much gift aid does for a charity. And I always say to people, if you're going to donate, please tick gift aid, because that extra 25% will come to help us do our leaflets and our collection boxes and things like that. And but I've looked at when I've thought I need to earn, we need to live as well. We need
That's
to warm
the hard
home.
part,
It's
isn't
hard.
it? You're doing this out of love.
Yeah.
It is not helping. Everyone still has bills to pay.
And the board always say to me, start taking a salary. And I'm like, no, because then those cuddle costs are not going to get repaired if I take the salary. And so I said, I might look for a part-time job that I can do around my limitations and things like that to earn some money, because at some point I'm going to have to. But at the moment, no, I don't want to take a salary, and I will continue working with companies, HR departments, etc., about grief management in the workplace and how they're not supported enough to have that grief in the workplace taken care of, and return back to work slowly. All of those different things need to be put in place, and it needs to come from somebody who's experienced it, as well as knows how to guide them through what there's going to be their new normal. And I think that's really important. So now with the bereavement shop, I do say to HR departments, don't send flowers, send a hamper, because it's going to help them much better.
I remember when I lost Deck, I didn't so much get flowers when I lost Riley, because not many people knew that I was actually pregnant. Well, I was 21 weeks. But when I lost Declan, I know my kitchen table was full of flowers. And it was lovely of those people. But like you said, then you throw them away because they die.
Yes, exactly. It's another thing to deal with.
Yeah.
I ran out of vases, for example.
Oh, same. You end up using jugs and stuff, and I think it's people, when you lose someone, they send you flowers, they try to send platitudes, and then they move on.
Yeah. But actually what the person really needs is someone to listen, maybe cook them a meal.
Yeah, because we neglect ourselves, don't we?
We do. We don't want to eat, and if it wasn't for my youngest brother being there at the time for us, we wouldn't have it. But he cooked, he made us eat, even if it was a small amount. So all those different things that you can do. And I mean, I say to people that sometimes people are losing a child when they've already have children. They might be at school. They might need their uniform signing, for example, just to help them keep going.
There's so many little things people can do just to help.
And I think the highlight of knowing that I was making a difference was when we received the Prime Minister's Award.
Which is phenomenal. And there's no way we can not finish the podcast with you quickly just telling me a little bit about that. And I'm so glad they recognised everything you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it came as a complete surprise. I actually thought it was a spam email when it first came through. And but somebody anonymously has recognised what we do, nominated us for a Prime Minister's Award in May 2024, and we got it. And when I replied to the email and I said, can I ask who has done it so I can thank them, and they said no, it's anonymous, but it's come through a board at Parliament. These things are not given out willy-nilly. They are they look at your charity and your books and everything before they will give you this. So it went through quite a number of people before we reported it. So that has come as a complete surprise, but really lovely as well, because our work for the NHS has been recognised, even though the NHS failed me a lot, and all the traumas that were caused by them. I support them and the bereavement midwives because I know they have a difficult job. Part of their job is supporting their bereaved parents, and without the equipment, it makes their job even harder. So, whilst they have, I say, failed me, I can't let them fail other parents. I have to do my part in that.
That's one thing in talking to you that I've noticed is you're not full of hate.
No.
You're turning what has happened to you into a positive to be able to help others. And to me, that's what your beautiful Luca Foundation is all about, is helping others because you didn't receive that help. And how beautiful is that that is what your son's legacy is.
Exactly. And I think sometimes maybe that's the reason he had to go, because someone needs to do this work because it wasn't being done before. And
Just to make your heartache any easier though, does it?
no, not at all. Not at all, because I'd rather have him.
Yes,
I'd
and that's
rather
the
have
key
my health,
thing.
You know,
Yes.
I'd rather have all of those things that I've lost than to be doing this, to be living with heartbreak, because you're never whole again.
No.
You're never complete again.
You're never the same person.
No.
But you are doing it with so much grace. And I thank you just so much for telling your story, Luca's story. Luca, centre stage of this story.
Yeah.
And I really do thank you for sharing it with me.
And his name actually means bringer of light. So if anything, he's actually shining a light on this subject.
Yes, he is. He is.
So I've always gone for meanings of names, and I've always loved the name Luca. So when I knew the meaning of the name, I was like, yeah, it's going to be Luca for him, definitely. And after he'd passed away, and I said, do I keep Luca for maybe another child in the future? And my husband said, no.
Only one
He's
Luca.
Luca. He's Luca. I was like, okay, he's Luca. Yeah.
Oh.
Every time we have his golf day, even the sun shines, and we always say, here he is here.
Yeah.
You know, the light is shining on our golf charity days. So yeah, he's always around, and when the sun shines and we have his events, I know he's there.
Well, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your time. And I hope that your story might help one of our listeners even to just know that they're not alone.
Yeah. I would say to anybody who's lost a child, there's no time limit on grief.
No.
When you have lost your child, it's a lifetime sentence for us.
Yeah.
And in no matter what way it's happened, you know, we're going to live with it for the rest of our lives. And which is why, you know, parents of older children, I won't get the cuddle blankets available for them, because I know, for example, Ashley Kane and Sophia Forgy, when Azalea died, and everybody knows their story, the moment, like Ashley has said on podcasts in the past, the moment she died, they weren't ready for her to leave the house.
No.
But if they'd have had the cuddle cot or a cuddle blanket at that time, she could have stayed at the home with them. And that's something I want to make known and bring light to in Luca's name as well.
Yeah. Well, I have no doubt that you're going to keep on doing these things in Luca's name. And what an incredible mom.
And you are as well. Doing this in Jack's memory is lovely to be in his van here, knowing that this is his fun place.
A little bit cold today, though.
But, you know, it's lovely. I love the way
Thank
you've got
you.
this set up, and it's an amazing thing that you're doing the deck as well. And as I'll do as much as I can do to help you as well.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll be friends for life now.
Thank you for listening. Next week, I'll be joined by Naomi, whose 18-year-old son Jay died suddenly in the early hours of New Year's Day 2022. Naomi was on holiday in Canada when she got the call. Jay hadn't been drinking and there was no signs. It was sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, which takes around 500 young lives a year in the UK. We'll be talking about what SADS is, who Jay was, and the incredible work Naomi's doing through our Luca Foundation to help save others. This podcast is in honour of my son Declan, and for anyone out there who's lost someone they love, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, and I hope in some small way this helps you feel a little less alone. Keep your heart safe until next time. And don't forget to follow or subscribe. Your support helps keep this podcast going.